It's a real privilege to welcome you all to this fireside chat with one of the most influential and widely respected figures in global diplomacy, Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's Minister of External Affairs. Over the past few years, Dr. Jaishankar has emerged not just as India's top diplomat, but as a powerful voice on global stage, unapologetically asserting India's interests, reshaping traditional alignments, and articulating a confident vision of India's place in the world. We are absolutely thrilled to have him with us today for an open conversation on India's role in the world, the challenges ahead, and the lessons he has learned along the way. Dr. Jaishankar, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure, and it's wonderful to see so many people here, so many good friends. So I'm in your hands.
So let's start. You have served under both Congress and the BJP governments, and you have played a pivotal role in shaping India's foreign policy, from the US-India nuclear deal to today's emphasis on strategic autonomy. Over this time, how has your worldview evolved, and how do you see India's place in the world today?
Well, I actually joined under a government which was known as the Janata Party, which was many, many years ago. And other than the Congress and BJP, of course, in between we had what were called third front or coalition governments as well. And I mention it because over many years, yes, India has changed, world has changed. And world views reflect those changes, both of ourselves, there's a self-perception there, as well as how you see the world. And if I were to sort of drill it down into two broad points, one would be that, today if you take, let's say, the top 5 economies, they are very different from what they used to be. If you were to use any metric of influence, it's quite different. So you had a rebalancing in the world, accelerated by globalization. And we are heading towards what most people would regard as an era of multipolarity, which is many centers of power and influence, and which are autonomous of each other and pursue their particular interests. So that's the global landscape. So where my worldview was concerned, I mean, in a way it would derive from what does India have to offer in such a landscape. And I think India does have to offer a lot because one, we would be a rarity today in the world, a civilizational state, a society which can trace its history for thousands of years and which still today is a nation state. There are very few like that anymore. Two, we would definitely have a lot to offer as not just as the most populated country in the world, but the largest pool of talent in a way, in an era where talent and human resources is going to count for more, the era of AI. I think we would also have something special to contribute to the world as a democracy, but as a very diverse society, a society which has valued its diversity and nurtured its diversity. And finally, because we are able to play the role of a bridge. I mean, these are not the easiest times in the world, but if you ask yourself, okay, how many countries are able to pick up the phone and talk to Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Iran, or the global north and global south, I would suggest to you there are not that many. And the fact that we are, a political democracy, a market economy, a pluralistic society, sort of a voice of the global south, but we are not anti-West. We get along, we participate, we attend the G7 meetings. In fact, From here, I'm going on to Washington for a meeting of the Quad, and from there, I'm going on to a meeting of the BRICS. So I think that should tell you something.
That's great. So let's move to a topic that a lot of people in this room care about, which is the US-India relationship. The relationship between US and India has seen real momentum in the recent years with some major highs, but also its fair share of friction, such as the recent trade and tariff situation to student visa concerns. Looking ahead, how do you see this partnership evolving over the next 2 years? And in your view, what's your vision for this partnership?
I would say, again, I say this over multiple administrations, but particularly for the last 10 years, 11 years. If you look at the trend lines in India-US relations, I think the trend lines have been very positive. Just think back over the last 5 presidents of America: Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, back to Trump. 5 very different presidents. And yet, at the end of every presidency, if you were to do a dipstick on India-US relations, you'll find it's better off than it was at the beginning of that presidency. And the trend line over the last 25 years has actually been very, very strong. Because I think there are structural factors that work for the relationship. That the economics, the technology, the human bridges, the education, the security, the energy, all these are today drivers of the relationship. Now, are there arguments, are there differences, are there episodes? Sure, it happens. It won't be for the first time. In fact, at every one of these presidencies, I can think of something which at that time was a friction point. I remember even the time when I was ambassador here. I literally came in a few days after we had a problem related to one of our diplomats in the city. And then I had to deal with 301 issues, with compulsory licensing controversies, with plans to sell F-16 aircraft to Pakistan. We dealt with it. So it's not, relationships will never be free of issues, even I would say differences. I think what matters is the ability to deal with it and to keep that trend going in the positive direction. Now, you spoke about trade. Yes, we are in the middle, hopefully more than the middle, of a very intricate trade negotiation. Obviously, my hope would be that we bring it to a successful conclusion. I cannot guarantee it because there's another party to that discussion. But no question, we do think today that trade, there will have to be give and take. And just like the US or people in the US may have views about India, people in India have views about the US too. And we'll have to find a kind of a meeting ground there. I believe it's possible. And I think we'll have to watch the space for the next few days.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to a topic that you've spoken a lot about, which is the Russia-Ukraine situation. India has drawn both praise and criticism for its stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and its assertiveness on the global stage. How do you balance India's national interest with global expectations, especially from the Western partners?
Well, it's one of those subjects where you are very tempted to say, I told you so. And why I say that is, 2.5, in 2022, when things were very different, when the public mood was different, when the debate was very different, we took the position saying, look, you're not going to be able to resolve this matter on the battlefield. That that this is not, this is not the era of war, that there has to be negotiation, there has to be diplomacy between these countries. And in fact, initially, frankly, that was not a very popular line to take. Even when people spoke about diplomacy, it was more that you gather a set of countries to castigate Russia. I mean, that was their right. But the point was, it was not very helpful to getting a resolution of the issue. Now the world has come around. I mean, I've been in Europe twice in the last month. And what I now hear in Europe is an interest saying, yes, we need to sit down and talk, and we need to talk the sooner the better, which is fine. I mean, that's the position we have advocated. We also feel they need to talk directly to each other, rather than, take positions which are, in a way, posturing or signaling rather than actually getting down to the brass tacks. So, at some stage this is going to happen. Now, I'm not sure that this passage of time, very frankly, has been helpful to the West. In fact, I would argue that, the longer it has taken, in many ways, many more issues have come to the fore, which were not there a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So, but, that's water under the bridge. Today we are quite willing to do anything we can to contribute to that engagement process. And in fact, in the course of the last 3 years, we have fairly regularly, we've had conversations in Moscow, which we have shared with Kiev, vice versa. Whenever any other country or any other party has tried to do something, if we could be helpful to that process, we have done that. It could be on the grain corridor, it could be on fertilizer supply. The grain corridor was led by Turkey at that time. The fertilizer issue was led by the Secretary General of the UN. There was an effort to stabilize the nuclear power station in Zaporizhzhia. We worked with IAEA head, Mr. Grossi. So if there's anything we can do, we are willing to do. But, for us, a common sense way is to negotiate a solution to it, because quite honestly, there's no other way.
With growing calls to de-risk from China, how is India positioning itself as a viable alternative for economic and strategic partnership with the rest of the world?
Well, we are positioning ourselves, quite frankly, on our own. I mean, meaning for our own good. It is, to me, unthinkable that an economy which is the 5th largest in the world, which would definitely by the end of the decade be the 3rd largest in the world, not have a significant manufacturing base. Because if you don't have a manufacturing base, you're not going to get innovation and technology, which is a corollary of manufacturing. And if a country like us, with our human resources and talent, doesn't have that technology and innovation, honestly, we are wasting our human talent. So if I were to work this backwards, to me, in a way, our economic future and all the possibilities, when we speak about AI and you speak about EVs and you talk about space and drone and underwater, I mean, these are all within the realm of possibility. If we actually gear up to have the capability and the human resources, the trained human resources, and the culture of creativity and innovation to deal with it. So how do you do that? One, to frankly make the country easier to do business, which has been very much the focus in the last decade. To make it much easier, not just for business, but for people to live, ease of living. You debureaucratize, cut down the rules, the paperwork. try to create a modern infrastructure, which has been very much the focus of our efforts here, and where, in a way, I would argue, where really very big changes have happened in the last decade. If you look at some of the numbers, and quite honestly, if one were to even look at the comparative state of infrastructure, I think there's a lot to be said for what is happening in India. I mean, in the last decade, we have built 75 new airports, which is about 7 airports a year. We are laying roughly about 10,000 kilometers of roads every year, about 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers of railways every year. If any of you who's been to India and traveled on a train, I mean, I think you would recognize the enormity of that transformation which is going on. If one even looks at education, at talent exploitation, I think again, roughly you've had 7,000, broadly speaking, new colleges and higher training institutions which have come up in the last decade. So there is a very deep sort of churning which is taking place in India, much stronger capacities. I mean, pretty much in any sector, if you look at the first 50, 60 years of what we did in India, and you look at the last decade, we managed to double. And there's a very broad sort of estimate that I'm giving you. So we need to do all of that, because until you do that, you cannot emerge as a credible destination for global business. And you cannot then become part of the global supply chain. I think today we have reached that point. You know, I see we have, if one looks at GCCs, really the explosion of GCCs in India today, and see the exports. I think GCCs today probably directly generate between 150, 170 billion dollars of exports. Or if one even looks today at how sort of relevant we have become to finding effective solutions in many areas. Digital public infrastructure would be one. Space would be one, where we would be globally competitive. Vaccines would be one. Pharma would be one. So you are actually seeing this emergence of India as a serious economic alternative. I accept that there is a lot to be done. I'm sharing this not to say, to me this is a kind of a takeoff point which we have reached today, and we are very hopeful that there's much more that could be built on this foundation.
You mentioned that you're going to DC for the Quad meeting. Mm-hmm. So it would be great to hear what your objectives are for the Quad meeting, and how do you see India's role evolving in the Indo-Pacific, especially amidst the growing tension between the US and China?
The Quad is a very interesting mechanism, partly because it was an international commitment which resurfaced during President Trump's first administration. So when one looks at what happened in whose tenure, this is certainly one where actually it was a new commitment made by the United States under President Trump. Okay. Now, there's been a lot of progress since 2017 when it was restarted. Again, it was interesting that the first international meeting of the Trump 2 administration started with a Quad meeting again. But it was on day one. In fact, Mr. Rubio had just got sworn in, and we all walked into his office 1 hour later. Now we've given him some time to catch his breath, and we're going to be back there to see, to do a stock taking and look at how we should take this further. But there are a lot of issues that we need to discuss in the Indo-Pacific. Issues about maritime safety, security, issues about connectivity, issues of technology, issues of pandemic preparedness, issues even of education. So you have four countries, in a way, four corners of the Indo-Pacific, who are actually who have decided that they have a shared interest in creating a stabler, more prosperous Indo-Pacific, and are willing to work in a very practical basis. And it's a kind of an equal arrangement. Everybody pays their fair share as you go along. That's very much today an acceptable way of working. So I think we'll get good results out of it.
That's great. And what about any specific remarks within the Indo-Pacific and with relation to what role India can play with the tensions between US and China?
Well, I'm not sure, there are certain realities of the landscape, okay? And one of them is that the relationship between US and China is not what it used to be. It has acquired a much sharper competitive edge. Frankly, where we are concerned, we look at these two countries and each one of them has made up its mind about how it views the other. Obviously, there'll be an element of tactics to it. There's a larger strategic view that they have of each other. We would look quite honestly to see in what way are our interests furthered in this landscape. I think in many ways you can see that we have very strong convergences with the United States. At the same time, we are China's largest neighbor. We share a land boundary. We want stable relations with China. They are a very large trade partner as well, a very imbalanced trade, but still a very large trade account. So for us, how to sort of steady the China relationship, create an equilibrium that is fair to us. At the same time, how do you work the convergences with the United States and get the most out of it? That's frankly the way we would approach it.
So moving on, you've taken a strong stance on cross-border terrorism emanating from Pakistan. What is India's message to global powers and international institutions on this issue? And what diplomatic and strategic red lines remain with Pakistan?
This morning I was at an exhibition on terrorism at the United Nations. This was something which our embassy, our mission to the UN had organized. And the reason we did that, we had a number of ambassadors from other countries who were there as well, is because we believe that terrorism is actually a threat to everybody. That no country should use it as an instrument to further its policies, because at the end of the day it comes back to bite everyone. And if we take the view that one terrorist act or one terrorist organization or one sponsor of terrorism is justified here, or you give them a free pass or you underplay it, it can easily happen. In fact, it does happen in other situations. So there has to be, the message to the world has to be that there should be zero tolerance for terrorism, that there should be no circumstances, no excuse, no justification under which you would allow, support, finance, sponsor terrorist acts. Now, in our particular case, we unfortunately had an experience of this. The experience has been very intense for the last 4 decades. But actually it started from the time of our independence. If you see, within a few months of our independence, terrorists were sent into Kashmir with this idea that they are proxies and they are tribal invaders, and then soon enough the Pakistani army followed. So we have battled terrorism really intensively for the last 4 decades. And we've had some horrific cases. I mean, everybody would remember the Mumbai attack, and where really a major global metropolis was, I mean, for a few days really brought to a standstill with attacks on a scale which could not be contemplated, and which particularly targeted foreigners, especially of this country. We've had an attack on our parliament, a parliament meeting in session with the intent of taking lawmakers and the people governing India hostage at that time. That it was foiled was a different matter. But do look at the dangerous intent and the risks inherent in an enterprise like this. We've had a string of these attacks, and we've now reached a point, and I think in many ways the Pahalgam terrorist attack on April 22nd, this sentiment in India that look, enough is enough. That we are, because the Pahalgam was meant, I mean, it was an act of economic warfare. It was meant to destroy tourism in Kashmir, which was the mainstay of the economy. It was also meant to provoke religious violence, because people were asked to identify their faith before they were killed. So we decided that we cannot let terrorists function with impunity. The idea that they're on that side of the border and that therefore prevents retribution, I think is a proposition that needs to be challenged, and that is what we did. So now bear in mind, these are not people who operate in secret. I mean, these are terrorist organizations who have the equivalent of their corporate headquarters in the populated towns of Pakistan. Everybody knows what is the headquarters of organization A and organization B, and those are actually the buildings, the headquarters that we destroyed. So we are very clear, there will be no impunity for terrorists, that we will not deal with them any longer as proxies, and spare the government which supports and finances in many ways motivates them. We will not allow nuclear blackmail to prevent us from responding, because we've also heard this for too long, that you are both nuclear countries, therefore the other guys will come and do horrible things, but you mustn't do anything because it gets the world worried. Now we are not going to fall for that. If he is going to come and do things, we are going to go there and also hit the people who did this. So no yielding to nuclear blackmail, no impunity to terrorists, no more free pass that they are proxies. And we will do what we have to do to defend our people.
India has been active in forums such as the G20 and the UN. What reforms do you believe are necessary in global governance institutions to reflect the realities of the 21st century?
It's interesting that you put G20 and UN together. And I'll tell you why it's interesting. Because before the G20 came, there was something called the G7. Okay, the G7 were primarily Western countries. Japan, for this purpose, was a Western country. Now, the G7 finally reformed. It reformed under compulsion. That when the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 happened, the G7 realized, G7, G8, because Russia was part of it then, they realized that they couldn't handle this on their own, and they needed to expand it and bring in other countries, and that's how the G20 came about. Now, the UN Security Council today faces the same predicament as the G7, which is, if you look at the big issues of the day, actually they've not been able to do very much. Well, you have what's going on in Gaza. You saw there's a war going on in Ukraine. You had this Iran-Israel stuff. You had the biggest challenge of the century in the pandemic. And I ask you, where was the UN in all of this? Nowhere. So if we are serious about keeping the UN relevant, which we believe in, it's not our case that the UN should be done away with. But the UN needs updating, UN needs refreshing. So if we are now heading for 80 years of the UN, I mean, it makes when the UN was founded, there were 50 members. Today there are almost 200. So think of it in any domain. I mean, if there's a quadrupling, if your shareholders have quadrupled, if your numbers of students have grown 4 times, if your employees have grown 4 times, how can you continue working the same way? It doesn't make any sense. But the G20 shows that it can be done. And we hope at some stage the UN, because I can tell you the majority of members want change. That the problem is a few who are blocking it, using arcane procedures and, wanting, I think they're not even serving their own interest well, because what they are doing is they think they're protecting their interest, but they're harming the institution. So overall, actually, their investment is getting less value there.
Thank you for that. So last question from me before we open up to the audience. So it's a fireside chat, so a more personal question. From being a diplomat to administrator, your transition into public life has been quite remarkable. What have been your biggest learnings, and what advice would you offer to the next generation shaping the future?
Well, my biggest learning is the next generation has a lot of advice to give me. It's amazing today how interactive the world is. For me, really a discovery how interested people are in foreign policy. During the last general elections in India, as part of the campaign, I would go to what I would consider maybe 3rd level, 4th level cities and towns of India. And I was honestly taken aback at the level of interest in the world, level of understanding of what was happening, level of questioning about what we are doing, and I was quite serious. I get honestly a lot of advice, and sometimes very good advice about how we should be engaging the world. What to me, I take heart because as a student of history in a way, I've always felt that many of India's problems in the past, I'm talking of distant past, hundreds of years ago, 500 years, 600 years, maybe more, was we were impervious to the changes which were going on in the world. So it could be changes which happened in West Asia and the Middle East. It could be changes which happened when sea power, when Europeans were able to harness sea power and go about establishing their influence. So in a way, we kind of were engrossed in a world of our own and missed a lot of what was happening in the global environment. Today, I really, if you ask me, obviously as a minister, my primary responsibility is to secure my country's interests. But beyond that, to me as a personal mission, it would be how do I heighten interest in foreign affairs in the country, which I believe is necessary for a world where a globalized world, a more technology-centered world where young people should understand that anything which happens in some other part of the world can impact them. And I'm very heartened by what I see. I feel today young people in India are very connected to what is happening in the world. It's not without its challenges, that connection, because they have expectations and aspirations which come out of it. But all in all, I would say to me that has been a very, very big source of satisfaction.
Okay, with that, I think we'll open questions to the audience.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. My name is Amit Kumar. I work for a company called Wipro, part of the leadership team. Also, Stipendum 97 batch chemistry, so similar course. I want to take you away a little bit from what you do to who you are, something similar to what you asked. How have you transformed yourself and your leadership style from your role as a Foreign Services Officer to Foreign Secretary to Minister, now shaping the agenda of foreign affairs? Second part of it is how do you learn? How do you prepare yourself for meeting? What do you do to you go after one meeting to the other? What keeps you, how do you prepare for those?
Look, in a way, you make transitions. Often the transitions make you. Okay. If you are in a position, in my case, let us say I was ambassador here. I went back to Delhi as foreign secretary. I briefly was in the corporate world, and then I came into the political world. Each one, the foreign secretary bit wasn't that hard because it was an extrapolation of what I was already doing. But my first transition shift was really to move into the world of business, where the metrics, the expectations, the working style was very, very different. I think a lot of it is to adjust to that, and there has to be a desire to prove yourself and try to do better in a new environment than the people who are already inhabiting it. Now, that's not, for me, that unnatural, because if you look at really what a diplomat does, we are parachutists, okay? We land in a country, and our government, in a matter of a few days or not weeks, expects us to know everything about it and give very serious professional advice about how that society works. So you are, in a way, naturally adaptive. You have to be on the go, and why I'm saying that is, and I apply, in a way, did the same with politics. And frankly, it's amazing how much you can learn by imitating people. You sit in an environment, you watch people. It is like a best practices. I entered cabinet, okay? So I'm new to politics. Now, I know my subject. I know the foreign ministry side of it, but I don't know the politics side of it. And you learn politics by watching people who are frankly better than you, longer than you, more experienced than you. And you absorb to a point where you come up to their level. That's why best practices are best practices. But the preparing, I just put a simple proposition to you. At the end of the day, you have to work very hard because there's no getting away from it. But certainly in politics or in diplomacy, you have to try to put yourself in the shoes of other people. If I were meeting you, I would try not only to know everything about you, but I would try to imagine what you would be thinking about me, or what you would be thinking about the problem which we are meeting about. And that's not that easy to do. You have to make that effort, which means you have to be interested in other people. Not just a biodata, not just a balance sheet. Ideally, if I were meeting you, I would like to know about your life, what you do, what your interests are, what have you done before, so that it's... So now if you've been doing it for some time, now for example, I've just done 6 years as a minister. I pretty much know all the other foreign ministers of the world. And I make it a point to have that relationship, with them, not just, business done, transaction over. But you sit and discuss other things, sports, whatever. You take your pick. I think that makes a big difference.
Pranam Jaishankarji and Bharat Mata Ki Jai. So one question in the India 2047 journey is really about 35 trillion to 50 trillion. And within that journey is the building blocks of FTA. So where do you see the progress of the FTA between India and US? Thank you.
With the US, it's not an FTA. It's something called a BTA, Bilateral Trade Agreement. There's a reason why if it's an FTA, it's got to go to the US Congress. If it's a BTA, it doesn't go to the Congress. It has the boundaries are a little tighter there. I think, as I told Dave, we are discussing it. There's been very, very intense discussions over the last few months. I can't vouch for which country has had how many rounds, but I suspect we would be among the countries which has done the most. There is, even as I speak, our delegation is in Washington DC. They've been there for the last few days. So our expectation or hope certainly is that we will bring it to common ground. But like any, and these are complicated negotiations. I mean, you are really looking at thousands of lines and doing very intricate trade-offs, both based on what are actually the market values of those lines and what could be the expected market values of those lines. So these are not simple back of the envelope calculations, far from it. So that exercise is going on. If they can get, I think, a fair balance, you will get an outcome. Obviously, diplomacy is an optimistic profession, so I hope that we would reach there. But things being what they are, it's not done till it's done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar, for being here. Dhruv Goyal, I run an investment management firm that invests in India. In a recent readout between a conversation between President Trump and Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, it was said that we never allow foreign countries or any third party to mediate a dispute that's happened between India and Pakistan in the most recent border conflict. But we continue to see President Trump, go on and on about using trade as a means of resolving this conflict. Has that in any way affected the trade negotiations and delayed its conclusion?
No, I don't think so. I think the trade people are doing what the trade people should be doing, which is negotiate with numbers and lines and products and do their trade-offs. I think they're very professional and very, very focused about it. In terms of what has been our position, yes, I mean, we have for many years, it's not a position just of this government in Delhi. I mean, it's been a national consensus that our dealings with Pakistan are bilateral. And in this particular case, I can tell you that, I mean, I was in the room when Vice President Vance spoke to Prime Minister Modi on the night of 9th May, saying that, the Pakistanis would launch a very massive assault on India if we did not accept certain things. Prime Minister was impervious to what the Pakistanis were threatening to do. On the contrary, he said, he indicated that there would be a response from us. This was the night before, something, the Pakistanis did attack us massively that night. We responded very quickly thereafter. And the next morning, Mr. Rubio called me up and said the Pakistanis were ready to talk. So I can only tell you from my personal experience what happened. The rest I'll leave to you.
We have time for one more question.
Kumar Verma, pleasure to be here. If I could be presumptuous and ask two questions, that'd be great. Right over here.
Okay.
The first question is that given the Trump administration's view on how international framework should exist, which seems to be an unpenned of decades of how countries operated with each other, your own comments about the inefficacy of the UN at the moment, what kind of international eco framework would you like to see happening where India would have a more prominent seat at the table given what's going on right now? If you could in a way re-envision the UN, what would it be?
Look, obviously everybody to some degree are in it for themselves. So I'm not pretending that I'm not. But I don't think we are in it just for ourselves. You don't today have a single African country. You don't have a single Latin American country. I mean, these are big continents who are not represented in key decision-making circles as permanent members of the Security Council. So it's not for us, this is not about, okay guys, make a little space there and I want to get in. We need some kind of systemic overhaul. If there isn't some sense of basic fairness and some sense of basic representation, you're not going to get people around the world to agree that this is a institution or this is a way of problem solving in which we all have stakes. Because today a large part of the world thinks we don't have stakes, and why should I listen to them? So if you are to restore the credibility or the effectiveness of the United Nations, I think you need a basic reform. Now, obviously I think India has very good credentials, but again I make one point to you. It's been our position saying put it to vote, open up the UN to reform. Let countries who believe that they are members, they are candidates, credible candidates, put their candidatures forward. Let it be democratic, let the world vote on it. But what we have seen is actually even that exercise is not being allowed to take off. So we need something which is fairer, not only because it's the right thing to do, but frankly it's a smart thing to do. If it is not fair, it's not going to work.
The second question.
Okay, keep it very quick.
Very brief. How much of the India-US relationship do you feel is defined by its stance on China?
It's not. It's a interconnected world. So everything is a factor. I'm not saying that it's not, but just look back at history. You had Clinton moving on improving ties with India. Okay. The same Clinton who pushed for permanent MFN for China, and between Clinton and Bush you had the entry into WTO. Okay. So if you look at the policies of the United States vis-a-vis China and the policies of the United States vis-a-vis India, it's not like you had people advocating for India who were against relations with China. Often they were the same people or the same administration or the same people within that administration. So I think it's a very gross oversimplification to make India-US about China. In fact, it's not just an oversimplification. I think it's even misleading at times. I can give you so many other things this relationship is about. We have such a big Indian community which contributes so much to this country. I think it's been a game changer. Now it's got nothing to do with China. We have today a very strong economic connect. Look at our trade numbers and look at the relevance of that trade to our respective economies. Look at our technology connect. Look actually at, we cooperate. Again, people tend to take even defense or security cooperation as something, there's that tendency to point it towards China. But I ask you to look at the other coast. I mean, we work to keep the Arabian Sea safe for global shipping. So this is an age of oversimplification. I urge you not to fall into that. I think world is much more nuanced. There is much more multi-causal. We have many more interests than just one country. I would certainly like to believe that the relationship is going well because there is great merit in me.
Dr. Jaishankar, thank you so much for taking time from your very busy schedule for this fireside chat. We're very grateful. Thank you again.
Thank you.